Let's dive in a little bit to his post-game comments then. So,
so often we got infighting in football in Australia and we put ourselves down and we say all the things that are wrong, and, the criticism of our own game by our own people is just over the top. I see Peter Volandis on every single press conference telling the whole world how good his sport is. He's an advocate for his game. He's passionate about his game. He's advocate for his product. And we don't do any of that. We're infighting all the time. We're like two seagulls fighting over one chip. We've got nothing and we fight over it. Like, we've got an amazing product here, amazing fan groups, both fan groups tonight. The Sydney FC end was full, our end was full, and it's a great spectacle. So I don't know why we always put ourselves down.
Staj said before the game, and he reiterated after as well, that not only is, the Sydney Derby, as you suggested, Christian, is the biggest game of the A-League, at least in the regular season for sure. Stajcic reckons that it is the event of the Australian sporting calendar, and he truly believes that in terms of the spectacle and the atmosphere and the entertainment. Right. And it doesn't necessarily get reflected in terms of how many people are showing up and how many people are watching. Now, regardless of whether the pure number is what makes it the event of the sporting calendar, you can make up your own mind. But, Will, the press conference kind of got taken in this direction. It feels like we get one of these from like a coach every 6 months. It's like this monologue about the state of the game and how we treat each other and how, the media cover the game, how the different factions inside football deal with each other. And I don't know, I'm interested in people's individual perspectives on what they made of it, because it felt like a rallying of arms. There wasn't like a particular watershed moment in terms of what's happening in the league. It was just a direction that Stajcic chose that he wanted to go down.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of seemed like he had pre-prepared it a little bit. It didn't really come from anything, as you said. Like, usually this is spurred on by a big moment happening in the league and a moment of division or controversy or something like that. And I think it was just Stadge riding high off a win, and the adrenaline was pumping, and he thought he'd speak while he was feeling pretty good about himself. But yeah, no, a lot of kind of what he said is in the right direction for everyone. And I don't know, it's as you were alluding to, the biggest sporting event on the Australian calendar is. It feels like that if you're there. It kind of feels like that. I go to a lot of varying sporting events, like that derby, and I was saying to my partner who I went with, the derby, there's a third of the total crowd, as you mentioned, Lachie. I don't think it's about that crowd number. It's about anything like that, but it just feels so electric compared to 60,000 at the SCG or for a Swans game and things like that. Like, I love all of it. I can appreciate all of it. I love the cricket. I went to the New Year's Test started this year against Pakistan. Those don't feel like the Sydney Derby feels. And sure, you can talk about the numbers and things like that, but I think he's onto something there, because there's no other moment in our every year sporting calendar apart from you get your World Cups and moments like that, but there's nothing that does compare to this fixture. But yeah, in terms of the media stuff, you can let it onto put it onto the other guys to weigh in. I didn't watch too much of the press conference, just like a little snippet of what you guys were showing. But in terms of the derby itself, I don't think there's anything like it.
It's funny, Christian, because like the lines almost prompted a moment of self-reflection for us, right? We're thinking, oh, it's, Staj is talking about all, and he wasn't singling out anyone particularly. He literally said everyone, the stakeholders involved in the game have a duty to, be champions of the game and present it in a positive light. And that doesn't mean not talking about the issues, right? It just means not, delving on them for longer than is necessary and trying to promote and be custodians of the game. And look, we think we've done a good job of that. And obviously we talk about the issues in the game as well, which we have to do. Is there because obviously there's a line between being positive and being PR, and the A-Leagues, especially doing their own media, have found that line hard to tread as well. What were your impressions of the comments?
Yeah, honestly, I thought he spoke really well. You can tell it was burning inside of him for a long time now, and he just wanted to get off his chest, and he thought that was the right time to do it after a derby win. And, off the back of what he said about that fixture being, the best game in Australian sport, essentially, right? And he thought, okay, I'm going to use this opportunity to say what I think. And he's bang on, he's spot on, in terms of the media to start with. Like, we know when it comes to football, it's been, a lot of negative talk. And we were having this discussion in our WhatsApp group chat yesterday and a bit today as well, how, what are the reasons behind that? Well, negative stories in terms, like, look at Murdoch Media, for example, right? I think Stajcic said in his presser as well, you get about 5 to 8 pages in the newspaper with, NRL content, and then, back here in Melbourne, as we know, Lachie, it's like he said, stage about 20 pages in the newspaper at AFL, and it's very hard for football here to get a slice of that pie. And the only way to get a slice is if it's negative content. And a lot of it in Melbourne over the past years has been, Melbourne Victory supporters lit up flares, this and that, negative stories like that, which take the headlines. And I think that's what Staj was referring to there in terms of the media. How that changes, of course, we've got a responsibility as well, being media. And as you said, Lockie, I think we do a fair job of being balanced, because, Staj wouldn't want us to deflect away from the negative stuff. He wants us to cover, the problems in the game and how do we find solutions. But he's coming from the perspective of it can't all be negative. And, I completely agree. Whether that changes or not in the future, obviously time will tell. But he also alluded to, inside our own four walls of, our federation, Football Show, the APL, of not being united, not being on the same page, fighting within each other. We have to accept that we've got a great product on our hands, right? We've got something to hold on, to cling on to. It's just that we always, internally, we're fighting somehow, whether it's, the APL or the FA not being on the same page, if it's just putting our own product down. And it feels as though that's just so an easy thing to avoid. But in past years, it's just been one thing after the other. It feels like we're trying to chase these other codes, whereas we should be trying to just follow our own brand, follow our own path, follow our own products, right? Because we've got something special to build on. Don't worry about anyone else. Don't worry about AFL. Don't worry about NRL. We've got, something to grow on. Of course, there's going to be improvements that have to be made. Staj, said that as well. It's not perfect. There's room to grow, of course, but I think, what he said in that press conference is really good. And I think it sheds a light as well, obviously, again, on the media and their responsibility. And, they've got more responsibility than I think they realise at times. I thought it was well said.
Jacob, you're fondly referred to sometimes on this podcast as the pessimist of the group. And usually that is particularly when we talk about Adelaide United. So I feel like we do push that to the extreme sometimes. But let me push something to you as maybe the optimist and presenting that positive angle, is that I believe at some point Australian football has all the fundamentals to be the biggest sport in Australia in terms of, you have youth participation, you have more people are interested in soccer as a sport in terms of worldwide appeal than anything else. And in Australia, I can't imagine those numbers are different in terms of people actually loving the sport. Now, loving the A-League is a very different story altogether. We understand that. But I believe there is a moment possibly in our lifetimes where that could flip. And there was a story that was released last week sometime, and you have to take this with a grain of salt as well. There were some anonymous sources at DAZN talking about obviously the new owners of Foxtel and the very large amount of money that they're paying for the AFL broadcast rights, for the return of how much new market are you getting, how many new subscribers are you generating, right? And you have to consider that these kinds of quotes and sources leak with a certain intention at mind, right? So we can't read too much into it. But there is a world where, if we have an owner who now has the AFL broadcast rights, who we know as DAZN have a big interest in football, as in soccer around the world, and then potentially Stan, are they going to, expand their football offering with the Champions League, with the Premier League as well, plus Paramount? All of a sudden you have three very competitive buyers, potentially for an A-League rights deal that, barring, a potential new, just little 2-year extension for Paramount over the next 2 seasons, is up for grabs within a 3-year window. Right. So potentially that could be some changing in the side. And we know a lot of the finances are driven by the broadcast deal.
Yeah.
So that's my optimistic outlook.
Look, I think there's definitely, I agree with you. Like, there is no reason why football can't be the biggest sport in this country. And look, I will be negative about teams' performances and things like that, especially teams I support. Arsenal and England don't escape it either. They cop it all the time. But I still love football. I think it's the best sport on earth. And I think that what it has compared to every other sport is so unique, and Will touched on it perfectly. You can make a small crowd feel massive. It can make an occasion feel so much bigger than it realistically is. And you just want that. You want to be a part of that. You want to experience it. And I think that's what makes the game so special. And so, yeah, I don't see any reason why. Well, I do see reasons why, but there is still the possibility that it can be the biggest sport in this country. But no, the idea of broadcast deals and things is very interesting. 'Cause, that article was quite it was very, very interestingly worded, wasn't it? With it felt maybe a bit like, are they kind of positioning themselves here to make a play? Are they just putting feelers out? What's going on here? But no, obviously, like I said, the finances are driven massively by the amount that the broadcasters want to spend and want to put into football in this country. I think, this is why I think Staj's comments just ring so true, is because we can all see it. Everybody involved in the game can see that football can be huge, and everybody wants it to be huge. I think that it's just a case of lacking that unity, and I've said in the past that it's an egos issue, even where it feels like everybody has their own vision of how it's going to get there, and nobody agrees on it. And Staj said that right. It's two seagulls fighting over one chip, right? It's like we've got really very little, and we're all fighting over it. Maybe we just need to get behind each other and figure out a way, to make that product just as big as it can be. So look, I think that football's great. I love it. I think that football in this country is awesome, and it's got something very, very unique that even to football around the rest of the world, it's very different here. So it's got so many great qualities. It's just about making sure that we can continue to push this game for good reasons and not bad. And Christian pointed out the media's role and the role we play in it, and Will, like you said, the occasion and the fans and the roles they play is huge as well. So look, I think Staj, it was a very, very well said little soliloquy of his. But it just keeps, it's every season it feels like, right? And you said this, Lachie, where it's like every 6 months we get a coach coming out and saying something, and it just feels like it doesn't change from each occasion. So hopefully we start to see some change.
Yeah, just going back to kind of what the article you mentioned earlier, Lachie, I think I read that too, and so the position of DAZN seemed to be like that they thought are paying continually too much for the AFL, and they've kind of squeezed all they can out of the AFL. So nobody wants a thing as an exec at a broadcasting company like DAZN. Nobody wants the product that they have 100% market share. You never want 100% market share, or you never want to capture everyone. You can't sell to any more, then you can't impress and with numbers to any share like stakeholders or anything that own you. I think the A-League is positioned perfectly to be that like growth opportunity for that company and for somebody, not just DAZN, but any company. It really just presents an awesome opportunity to it has that room to grow. It is a global product that has the benefits of that the NRL does, that the AFL does. I was listening to a podcast not long ago with Mark Howard, and he works on the AFL and the cricket, and he was talking about the differences between the tribalism you get in the AFL, and that's its strong suit, and the global side of cricket. So going to the IPL, I think he was commentating there, and you see that it's a global game, really. You can feel it. A-League has the potential, and football has both. I think it has just such a perfect opportunity to capture that massive football audience. And I've said it a lot, Lachie, like you mentioned, the highest participation rates are always, the highest interest rates are 100%. We can see that in the World Cup moments. We can see that in what's happened in this country and how united it is in a World Cup run, the Matildas run, anything like that. Like, it has, the potential is absolutely there. And I think that a company like DAZN can recognize that and is required for that to happen, because we need everyone to be pulling in the same direction, which goes back to what Staj said about two seagulls in one chip. Like, everybody is pulling in different directions as it stands. But if everyone is united in that way, and we've got the backing of a broadcaster who wants to, make revenue out of it, that's fine, squeeze the money out of it, but it has that growth potential there. And I think it is really exciting. As you say, Lachie, it definitely has its place as the biggest sport in Australia in the future.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying with the building blocks, right? You pointed out the differences beautifully. It has that growth potential. It has the fundamental interest in the sport and the worldwide appeal. All the building blocks are there. If you get the same level of broadcast commitment, general media coverage to every other sport, football will win out every single time, Christian.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to piggyback off one of your points, Lachie, you made at the start, how you said you can see football being, the biggest code in this country, at some point down the line. And whilst personally, I can't see it, but at the same time, does it need to be to succeed? I think that's also the problem as well.
It doesn't have to be to succeed,
because,
but
and I
the
think
ceiling is high.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the problem, though, within just our code in general. It's like we try and follow these other codes and say, oh, they've got, this attendance and we're down here. And it's like, it kind of diminishes us a bit. It's like the gap, we think the gap is so big, but that's why I'm saying we've got to focus on our own product, because what we've got at the moment, it's great. It's just that I think we're trying to compare ourselves to other codes around us who are much bigger. You got AFL, for example, 150 odd years of history. That's very hard to erase and try and flip that for football to be the biggest code in Australia. So even if it doesn't happen in the future, that doesn't mean that we're a failure or football can't succeed. It can still succeed. I think that's what we have to remember as well, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah, we have that. We aim high. We want it. We're saying it doesn't have to be to succeed 100%. Doesn't have to be the number one sport. But I think we have to be realistic with the journey along the way and enjoy where the product is at all times. Enjoy this crowd. And celebrate the Sydney Derby. Celebrate everything that happens in this league. But you can still absolutely aim for the top. And when we, if it comes to that endpoint, then yeah, celebrate. You have to be realistic and enjoy the journey. Like it's with the same with everything. You got to enjoy it. It's not about the destination. If you're enjoying it now,
the friends we made along the way.
But no,
it's
it's
the
true.
podcast we started along the way.
But yeah, it'll get there. Christian is now flipped with Jacob, and is now, look what you did in the Slack today, Lachie. Now Christian's the pessimist.
He takes one holiday to Europe and comes back cynical. It just
maybe it's the common theme is Europe doing it too.
Yeah.
The final point I want to make, and Christian, you talk about the history of the AFL and having 150 years of history. Obviously, football as a sport has a longer history of that. But when you talk about dominance in the modern sporting world, it comes from your power, it comes from your money, it comes from your commercial ability, which in a 21st century environment is on the back of broadcast deals. Now, the deal that the AFL did, and I think it was 2001, which was the first major, broadcast deal for the AFL that brought in 500 million or something like that. That is only the timeline of 25 years, right? And if we're saying that potentially, higher ups at DAZN are pointing at the fact that this is the top level of the AFL, we're paying a lot of money for it with not a whole room for growth. Like, that's why the AFL went to China in the past, right? Is because they want to expand their international reach, because they are very aware that their market caps out at just under 30 million in terms of active people that are interested in the game, and they don't even have all of that. So football's potential is massive, and I guess to bring this full circle, that is why we're here. We're trying to push forward the game, trying to celebrate the game. So in that spirit, let's continue on. I didn't quite expect that conversation to go as long, but it's good when we get a tangent that we all feel so passionate about.